avoid restorations because it's something that some clients don't understand is a restoration is not necessarily woodworking. You use a lot of woodworking techniques to restore pieces, but good morning, everybody. I'll answer your question in a bit. Good morning, everybody at the Hardware Center. Welcome this morning to our talk about shellac. Everybody online, I'd like to welcome you to our morning's chat. For the online guys, please do put your questions, and if you struggle to hear me or see the information we're giving to you, please give that in the comments, and we'll attend to them as much as well as we can. For those online, you missed an opportunity to get your hands on a little bit of free shellac in a canned fruit bottle. So attendees to our class this morning got at least the first 6. Peter? No, I've got lots. You still got lots? Save it for the later. Okay, so if anybody's online and they're close, there's a bottle available if you're interested. Apparently there's coffee too. So this morning, just a quick introduction. My name's Dylan. I'm a furniture designer and manufacturer based here in South Africa in Gauteng. I make bespoke pieces for customers and design. I'm also quite involved in woodworking education and blog regularly on my website and send out newsletters and articles and so forth. I also have plan sets available on my website. I do specialize in a lot of hand tool woodworking, although that's not the only techniques that I do use. I'm what is readily known as a hybrid woodworker. So I use both modern machinery as well as hand tools to make and produce my pieces for my customers. Work out of a double garage. So as you can imagine, it gets quite interesting when you build a boardroom table of 3.5 meters long. So, but all in the name of woodworking and fun. Today we're talking about shellac. So shellac is one of those, as far as woodworking goes, one of those dark arts. There's a lot of information about shellac, and a lot of it's very, shall we say, organic. And it's one of those areas or finishes where a lot of it's driven by tradition and opinion in regards to how to use shellac. Is it a good finish? Where do you use shellac? Then we don't even get to what is called the pound cuts and how to make up and how to dilute and so forth. So this morning's talk is a little bit to demystify some of the opinions around shellac and provide some clarity around what is shellac, what it is made of, where does it come from, and how to use it in a modern woodworking environment. So you'll notice that in my title I say it's the one true universal finish. Something that's interesting about shellac is the fact that if you apply a wax finish to a wooden surface and then apply a poly or a varnish over that, the varnish won't stick to the shellac, to the oil-based finish. Oil, there's just no surface for your film finish to key to and stay there. Not the case with shellac. So if you apply shellac to a surface with the caveat that it needs to be de-waxed shellac. Shellac generally has waxy compounds in it. And it needs to be a de-waxed shellac. But if you use a de-waxed shellac, I've even tried it with non-de-waxed shellac. If you apply a poly or a film finish onto shellac, it sticks. It stays there. That's my personal experience. And the nice thing about it, it works the other way as well. So you can actually apply shellac to either an oil finish or oil to a finish that you put shellac on. So it is, if not the only, one of the very few true universal finishes where you can actually combine an oil with shellac and vice versa as well. Of course, if you do a film finish, it does need to be de-waxed shellac ideally. And it's just normal process shellac, but they do remove the waxes out of it. Not exactly sure if Hardware Center actually stocks de-waxed shellac. I need my eyes. I don't think these are de-waxed, but speak to the guys. I'm sure they'll be able to source it for you, and you can use it. Okay, let's get going. So, a lot of guys jokingly will say shellac is bug poo. Shellac is not a bug poo. It's actually a resin that is excreted by the female of the shellac bug. And they typically, we have a taker for our last bottle of shellac. Sir? We'll hand it out. You're lucky.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Guys online, you're too late. Okay, so it's excreted by the female lac bug, and it's a resinous coating that they harvest in Oriental countries. I think on the next one. So it's not bug poo. Okay, that's the first thing. A lot of guys will say it's bug poo, but it isn't. And as a result, it's also indicative of where we use it. Now, shellac is used much more frequently in our day-to-day lives than you may expect. And we'll cover that. So typically, you'll get your shellac in flakes like this, and I'll show you the other examples as we go along. So it mainly consists of various acids, resins, and waxes, and getting back to the de-waxed and waxed shellac. So that's the main components. It's harvested in India and Thailand mainly, in the natural environment. It sort of lost favor in the 1920s, 1930s or thereabouts. So before we went online, we had a quick discussion about shellac and its place in modern woodworking as a finish. And I mentioned that shellac was very much replaced during those particular decades because in the olden days, you had a cabinet maker and you had a finisher. It was often the case. So you had somebody who made the piece of furniture, then they would take it to a finisher, and the finisher would usually finish it. And often they would use techniques like French polish, and those techniques are really hard to do, really difficult to do, technically very demanding, and it was easier for a maker to drop off a piece at a finisher, and the finisher would continue while the guy keeps making pieces of furniture and pieces for his customer. And that's really how it worked. 1930s, 20s, there was a big change in where the makers actually became the finishers as well. And as woodworkers today, very rarely would we drop off a piece at somebody who would then finish it for us. So we are the one-stop shop. So to some extent, with how difficult shellac was to make, and the advent of technology and the availability of polymers to be able to do varnishes and so forth, so the petrochemical products that we started to use to do our coatings and our film finishes and so forth, then became into favor. And remember, that's also similar time to the where industry became very mechanized and high volume production came into play and so forth. So a lot of that was lost and taken over by techniques that were much, much easier to apply and so forth. Everything all right there, Jordan? Shop. Okay. Interesting. I love doing research. I can spend an inordinate amount of time doing research. To my wife's disdain, I've recently developed an interest in astronomy. So I've been spending a lot of time researching telescopes and photography and astrophotography and an inordinate amount of time. But during my research about shellac and it not being bug poo, which is something that I knew, is the first hits that I got on the net is about environmentalists wanting to stop the harvesting of shellac because of bug abuse. They believe we are taking advantage of the bugs, and we are mistreating them by harvesting a natural product. So I found it interesting when typing in shellac that the first hits I got on Google were websites actually detailing bug abuse and that we should stop using shellac. Now, it's interesting. Often we, in a very limited way, we look at the products that we use and we don't necessarily realize how broad its use case is in the world out there. For instance, balsa wood. Okay, I used to fly model aeroplanes. I used to build model aeroplanes out of balsa wood. And we think that balsa wood is the exclusive domain of model RC pilots. Balsa wood is grown and made as ballast for shipping. That's where it is used the most. And it's the same with shellac. Shellac is not an exclusively used product in woodworking. Okay? It has a myriad of other uses. And we are a very, very, very small proportion of the people who actually use shellac on a regular basis compared to the rest of the world.
What other uses would there be?
About to show you. So some of us of a certain age will recognize this. Some of us may not. Before the advent of vinyl, these were made from shellac. So what we know as LPs, before the advent of vinyl, was made out of shellac, believe it or not. Ladies, some gentlemen, beauty products, especially nail varnishes. Shellac provides that hard, tough surface in the nail varnish. It does find its way into other beauty products as well. Food. Anybody like Smarties? M&Ms? So how do they stop those Smarties and M&Ms to simply just melt away in your hand? If you hold on to them long enough, they will melt away. But they're coated with shellac. Okay? Shellac is a food-safe product, so it's used in a lot of food products as well. Electrical. It's fallen a bit out of favor, but shellac is very, very, very good insulator against electrical current, as far as I learned. You seem to agree? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So it was used in the electrical environment quite a lot until they found other materials. Medical. It's one of the ways they make your tablets go down better and easier and smoother and what have you. They coat tablets with shellac to be able to do so. And then, of course, our good friend, the vinyl. So it's a very wide range of uses with shellac, very high volumes and tonnage being used yearly, and you can imagine that the environmentalist will say, hang on, we're being rude to bugs. But then again, my opinion is it's a natural resource, and if it's managed responsibly, why not? Especially in cases where we haven't found other products viable that we can use for those same particular use cases. Personally, I hope they never, ever, 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 ever remove M&Ms from the market. Okay. And the best Smarties, and this is a typically South African thing. I don't know if you guys can recall, once again, a certain age group is when Woolies went over from clothing to food. When you first got the Woolies food shops, they had their version of a Smartie, and those were brilliant. I used to love that. M&M is the closest I've ever been able to get to those. So the use of shellac is probably closer to home than you may think from a woodworking perspective. If you've ever used sanding sealer, more often than not, it's shellac. So we also had a quick discussion before we went online in regards to filling the grain on wood on a surface before you do your finishing, and using a sanding sealer with the dust from the wood that you're actually making a piece from is a common common use case of making a paste, getting that into the grain, and then sanding it down and filling in the grain. And shellac is more often than not used in sanding sealers. So even though you may think that you've never used shellac, inadvertently, if you use a sanding sealer, you very likely have done so.
I've literally been unable to find an actual shellac labeled sanding sealer in this country.
Yeah, it's labeling. Look, it's not exclusive to sanding sealers, so it's not a case of all sanding sealers have shellac in it. But it could also be that the labeling laws, wherever you are, may require to a certain extent. And let's face it, labeling laws in South Africa are lax at the best of times. So, yeah. No? Labeling is suggestions. And so, yeah, blame for a lot of ills in our country, especially stuff like diabetes and so forth. So I've actually got a can of sanding sealer in my workshop. I bought it because I wanted to fill holes, and I was told that filling holes and gaps is you mix the dust with sanding sealer, you work it into a paste, you put it in the hole and it works. Frankly, I've never got it to work, so I've got a can of sanding sealer available if anybody wants it. I don't use sanding sealer. So as far as finishes go, there was also a question before we started, is what do I generally use as a finish? I use oil finishes. I prefer the oil finishes. So your oil finishes like Pro Nature, Rubio, so forth, I like them because I like the way that it's easy to prepare the surface, and I like the way they apply it, and I like the longevity of the product. So because I don't use film finishes or petroleum-based finishes, liquid petroleum-based finishes and polys and so forth, because I don't use that, I often don't use sanding sealers on any of my workpieces. Okay. If you ask me to define exactly what one should use a sanding sealer for, I wouldn't be able to tell you because I simply don't use them. So yes. Any questions thus far? Welcome. Nice to see you again. Jordan, any questions there? Good. How are we looking for time? I'm going too quickly. We did agree that it was going to be a short one, didn't we? Okay. No questions. Guys, we need to make up the time. Please do.
Do they kill the bugs?
No.
To get the shellac?
No. Not as far as I know. Am I misinformed? Okay. So it excretes it, it sits on, the photos that I had seen and what I read was it actually sits on the leaves or stems of wherever they sit. So it's an excretion that they make. I think it's for reproduction or something. I didn't do that level of research exactly, but all the photos I had seen is the shellac sits on the leaves and stuff, and I think the environmental concern, and somebody might be able to correct me, I think the environmental concern specifically is that they are bred to be harvested, and environmental or natural habitat may be destroyed in the process or so forth. I think that's the main concern. But I do not think they kill the bugs to harvest it because it's an excretion. So it comes out of them and then they go off and do something else. That's my assumption. So we have different versions of shellac. Some of them are a little bit easier to work with than others. You will typically see shellac in flake form like this, but you do get them in buttons. So you get them in buttons like this. Now, those of you lucky enough to have gotten your free sample, as you'll be adding or we'll be adding the solvent to it, and it's not, it doesn't dissolve readily. It's a process. And that's where pound cuts for me and very technical weights and volumes become a little bit problematic. I tend to be one of those thumbsuck woodworkers. If it looks good, it is good, and if it works well and it doesn't provide me with too much issues, I go with it. So I don't focus on a lot of exact measurements when I prepare my finishes, especially when it comes to shellac. Coming from a lab background where a fraction of a millimeter was important, one would think I'd be a little bit more careful about it, but yeah, maybe because of all of that, I'm not all that precise, shall we say, in my approach on how I do it. But you'll see when we apply, is to get it to this point, it took me about a day or two of mixing and stirring and mixing and stirring, and then adding a little bit more solvent, because you get a point where the solvent you've added gets saturated and it won't dissolve anymore. So therefore you just pop in a little bit more, what have you. So what pound cut is this? I have no idea. I'd go half volume-wise, shellac and solvent, but we're going to discuss this in a little bit more detail as we go on. So this does have its purpose. Question?
Yeah, a note on mixing shellac. I mean, I've never actually had an issue with shellac dissolving. I just found that it took time.
Yes.
And it shouldn't be too cold. I mean, so if in a normal sort of room temperature, the flaky one dissolves within a day, within half a day, very quickly, even if I'm mixing a big bottle.
Is it, and what's your ratio between shellac and solution?
Pour it in the bottle halfway, right?
Yeah.
And then I pour the essence and it covers the top of the shellac.
Yeah.
And that's it. And then I leave it and give it a shake here or there and it dissolves. But I found that the blonde one, for some reason, took a lot longer to dissolve. It took up to a week, but eventually it did. You just go in there and give it a shake every now and then.
Yeah.
So I think you can't really rush the process. If you wanted to, you could, but they'll eventually dissolve.
Okay. Yeah, just for the sake of the guys online, we were talking about the dissolving of shellac, and it was mentioned that it takes longer, but also that for certain colors of shellac, we do find that you have dissolving quicker than you may have otherwise. And also temperature, it's also temperature specific. Now, temperature specific in regards to dissolving anything into a liquid is a known fact even from my days in the lab. So at some point you get saturation, and when you heat it up, because your molecules and atoms expand, there's more space for what you're trying to dissolve, and therefore it will dissolve. So heating it up and having it in a warm place will also assist in the dissolving process. So that is the case. This did take a couple of days, but that confirms what you have just said. That's the blonde, and the blonde then confirms. Also, do keep in mind that this is a biological process, okay? And because it's a biological product, it's really hard to have exact consistency between batches that are processed and harvested and brought to you. So for instance, anybody who makes food, or let's say a product where, gentlemen, a beer. If you open a beer of your favorite or a version of your favorite libation, it tastes the same here as it does tomorrow and the day thereafter. And a lot of work goes into having that consistency from one to the other. Okay? I used to make my own beer, so making something like a lager, which we know as Castle or SAB products, is probably the hardest beer to make. And the reason for that is not just temperature, but the stuff that they put in it contributes so little to the taste that there's no way to mask a raw material that's put in the wrong way. So that's why something like a lager or a lighter or a beer is really difficult to consistently get the taste the same. And that's why a lot of home brewers, the guy who make beer, actually avoid it. And it's the same here. This is something we need to keep in mind. So you may buy a bag of shellac today and it dissolves no issue, and it gives you a type of finish that you're happy with. I've had my shellac now for close on to 2 years because I use it so little. If I buy another bag of shellac in 2 years, the supplier might have changed, their production methodologies might have tweaked slightly. There are changes as a result of the fact that this is a biological raw material, and you may find that its performance is not necessarily the same as what you may be used to. And that's why when you make a piece of furniture, this is free advice, okay? You're going to have offcuts. process your offcuts the same way you would do the piece of furniture. Keep them. Test your finish on them before you apply the finish. Unless it's a finish that you are so familiar with that you're happy to go straight to your workpiece. And especially if you're trying a new type of finish that you haven't tried before. Okay? Process it to the same level that you would the components of your piece of furniture, and you use these to test. I often, when I do a project, and I do, as I mentioned, I do oils, I'll have different colors of oil. So I've got these testers, and I try different colors of oil, and I can try and see what I like. So really important, and it's always a good idea to have your scraps around. Okay, so we did mention waxed and de-waxed, and of course you get them in different colors. So different colors will give you different kinds of finish. Now, this is blonde. This is what is typically known as blonde, correct? Okay, that's blonde. So now you can imagine that blonde is not going to be clear, look like this. The color is going to contribute to your final finish of color. So that's going to give you a yellowish color. If you don't like the yellow, you do have other options. What's nice about the darker colors, though, is if you'd like to maintain a darker color on a piece of wood.
So we just got a question from Philip J. on the chat. It said that shellac is 2 years old. Does homemade shellac have a shelf life of 6 to 9 months?
Is that dissolved shellac or shellac in flake form? Okay, because in flake form, effectively it shouldn't have a expiry date. However, once you've prepared it, and it's actually on one of my other slides, once you've prepared it, it does start to deteriorate. So therefore, you only prepare as much as you need, and once you've prepared it, if you've had it in a can or something like this for an extensive period of time, you then make up a new batch. Okay, just check if we've got the answer.
I think we'll fine finish it might matter, but we use it quite regularly just as a paint to paint ebony keytops on piano.
Yeah.
And then we mix some black powder into it, just because it sticks to the keytop and whatever finish was under it really well, and it gives a nice feel and it's easy to finish off. And we've never had a problem, even though we sometimes mix a batch and it'll keep it 2 years or longer.
Yeah.
And yeah.
What black powder do you put in?
I ordered some sort of a black powder from a piano, not a piano, from a specialty pigment place in the UK. It's like a really, really fine, super dark black. It's like midnight black. I mean that.
Yeah. And you
it's like 1 teaspoon into a 500-gram jar of shellac, and it's kind of blacker than it.
okay, and you applied onto the existing finish.
Yeah, straight over. So we give it a light sand and then we just go straight over the existing finish.
Yeah.
And it's black.
Yeah. So just for the guys online again, Rudy is you involved with piano restoration and so forth. So what he mentioned is they paint shellac, tinted with a black powder. They paint that on the ebony keys. Now, ebony is really rare, hardly available, and if you do get your hands on some, look after it. Last quote I saw for ebony a cube was, I think, 80,000 US, give or take. It's incredibly rare. So therefore, ebony is no longer used to make, you would be able to tell me, but ebony is no longer used to make piano keys. But coming back to the fact that I mentioned here that it's a universal finish, when you guys apply it, you just give the key a slight sand and you apply it on top of whatever finish was on top before. So you're only sanding it to key the surface and then you apply it, which again comes back to the fact that more so with shellac than other modern finishes, it is a finish that is very forgiving about what you applied onto. And your surface preparation, you can get away with a little bit more than you may otherwise be able to. I don't know if you find that.
Yeah, so I mean for our purposes, it's not too pernickety how we mix it up, and
Yeah.
It doesn't have to, because we're not using it as for French polishing, for instance.
Yeah.
I think if you were French polishing, you'd have to be much more careful with how you filter it and how you store it and
Yeah.
how long you store it. But you know,
Yeah.
but, no. If the any other uses for a sanding sealer, which we mix blonde shellac and then we mix in superfine pumice powder, which we also have to order from overseas because we can't buy it here. And then we use that as a sanding sealer. And over that, we'll put something like Osmo or Rubio, and no issues with adhesion.
Once again, coming back, so in a practical sense, we're also seeing in your case that shellac is that universal finish, that you can apply it on anything and almost anything over it. So if you're looking for pumice, we might have a solution for you. See? It's making the connections that matter. So those are the forms. So your choice of color really depends on what you want your final finish to look like, and you will only get there through some experimentation.
So does different colors come from different plants? Or
Honestly, I think they come from different, maybe regions, and I think they may color them, I think. Or they may come in this color and they get bleached. Okay? Under correction. I'm not exactly sure. Probably should have done more research in its manufacturing.
less astronomy?
Sorry, Dylan, I did research it now. So apparently the female will actually eat sap from the tree and then it's secreted after. So I believe the colors are actually related to the species of the tree and the sap that it produces.
Okay, so what you are telling me, it is bug poo. Or the female bug has got either poor or good taste, depending in a dietary habit. Okay, cool. It's an M&M's. Guys, you can eat it. Okay, so why even bother? So if we replaced it with what is supposedly better products in the 20s and 30s, why do we even bother with shellac? Why do you even still get shellac? Okay, it's ease of use. It's really easy to use, unless you do a French polish. Okay, French polish is hard, but it's really easy to apply, and I'm going to be applying some on these two, and I'll show you how easy it is. It's really, really easy to use. Your prep and application, your prep, I have to admit something, is I hate sanding. I truly do not like sanding anything. So if I'm getting a surface prepared for any piece that I work on, unless I really cannot get to the surface because it's a big surface, I use a hand plane. I do all my finishing in a hand plane. So I find it to be quicker than sanding and smoother, but on a hand plane, back to your keys, the reason they sand it is to key the surface. So on a plain surface, you would often need to sand it back very slightly to key the surface before you apply your finish. Not the case in an oil finish. It doesn't need to be in an oil finish because oil is a penetrative finish. But so ease of use, it's really hard to beat. It's a really good finish to beat in regards to ease of use, both in prep and application. Food safe. Big question you get from a lot of people. I actually was in the shop a couple of months ago, and I had a discussion with a gentleman around finishes that they can use on chopping blocks. So because they have it on M&Ms, because they have it on medication and so forth, it's food safe. So you can use it as a sealer on items that you're going to be using in the kitchen. It may not necessarily be the best solution for utility items like those because it's not an incredibly hard wearing finish. But if you want to use it to seal the wood and treat it, because also, what I didn't mention earlier in the use cases, it is also quite resistant to water. Now, anybody who's tried to fix a ring left by a glass of condensing ice or water on a shellac finish would disagree, but it doesn't go through the finish. It mars the top surface, but it doesn't go through the finish. So it's relatively water resistant.
Got a fancy trick for fixing that also, by the way.
Leave that until I'm going to give. You should have been standing here and doing the presentation.
And you can't leave the fancy trick till the end. Now we're curious.
Okay.
It's
So that confirms your research, Sean. Okay. That's interesting.
Also, another part of it, the reason why they secrete it is for better grip strength on leaves and tree bark and whatnot. I don't know why specifically the female secretes it.
Yeah, the question is why do you need more grip? Yeah. Well, look, the eastern parts of the world also suffer from monsoons and so forth. So maybe they need to hang on during a serious storm. So thanks, Jordan. Thanks for the research. So yeah, that's shellac. So it's as I mentioned, it's a much wider field than that which we can necessarily cover during a short discussion on a Saturday morning. Okay, food safe, low VOC. Okay, this is where my Afrikaans shines through. Is it VOC or are VOCs? Is VOC. So you see it as a singular. Okay. So we have low VOC. So that is volatile organic compounds. So volatile organic compounds is the moment you open the can, it's volatile, it can burn, it evaporates, gets into your nostrils, gives you a headache. So it's when you walk past your protective mask on the way to your spray booth and you say, I've just got this little panel to spray, and then you have a headache or a hangover for the next week. It's because you've been inhaling all of those organic compounds and solvents. So it's low organic solvents or compounds, and the only organic compounds you have will be from here. It's from the spirits or the solvent that you use to make up the product. And you'll see when we apply it, it's once you don't smell that anymore, it's a good indication that your coat is dry. Because what happens is you apply the finish, that's got your organic solvent. So that's just a vehicle to carry the resins onto the surface of your wood. Once this organics is on the surface of the wood, your solvent evaporates, leaves the resins behind, and that dries it. And that's effectively how the two work together. It's quick drying, and I'll paint these sections, and likely by the time it's gone through the group to have a good whiff and smell what it's like, by the time it gets here, it will likely be dry. Okay. But once again, that's also a function of how far you dilute the product. The more concentrated it is, the thicker it is. Just want to finish this thought. The thicker it is, and the thicker it is, the longer it will take to dry. Okay, Jordan?
So Freddie's just got a comment here. If you mix shellac in the shop and store it for later use, always test it if it's still good on a piece of scrap wood. If it remains tacky after about 30 minutes, it's no longer usable.
Good way to judge, yes. And it's the same with oil finishes as well, by the way. If your oil finishes, generally they don't go off, but if you've applied it, dried the surface, and it doesn't want to dry and remains tacky, that's also a good idea, a good way to tell that your oil finishes aren't good to use anymore. Okay, but I think as far as it remains this in this form, look, I'm not saying it's going to last forever, but it's going to last a lot longer. It's the moment you get it here that the clock starts ticking. Okay, once again, we get back to the fact that it's a truly universal finish. So it's not a one-horse pony. It can do a lot of things for you, and it's got a lot of functionality within the shop. Okay, so don't we all want to be there? We do prefer South African beaches with our sand a little bit finer. My wife spent a lot of time in the UK. She says beaches like South African beaches do not exist in the UK. Confirmation in the back of the cloth. So making the cut, and this is where a lot of guys get stuck with shellac. It's what is the cut? We live in a country that work in millimeters and liters, not pounds and ounces. Okay, so being a woodworker, I buy a lot of plans online, and I build a lot of projects from online classes and so forth. And I know what an inch looks like. Okay, I know what an eighth of an inch looks like because a lot of those plans and projects come from places that still use imperial measurements. My dad is a fitter and turner of trade. And one day we had a discussion around the project I was busy with, and I said, yeah, just use 2 inches. He freaked out. It sounded like he had a heart attack on the other side of the phone. Apparently when he was learning and starting to work, the laws in the country changed to change from imperial to metric. And you would be fined if they found any imperial measuring equipment in your workshop. You would literally be fined by the government if that was the case. So today, a little bit more lenient and so forth. So I've got a whole range of imperial measuring equipment because I use them a lot. But there are solutions for us in regards to figuring out what a pound cut is. And you would only really need that if you want to sort of stick to the known recipes and that which the guys have calculated to work or not to work and how they prepare it and so forth. Once again, Jordan just finished the thought. So once again, we're in a case where you're working with an organic product with your wood on your workpiece. So sometimes tweaking the recipe is necessary. And sticking to the exact rules may not necessarily be the best way to go about it. Jordan, question?
Yeah, just a couple of comments here. According to a quick research, the shelf life of an unopened bag of shellac flakes is 1 to 2 years, and waxy shellac can last up to 5 years.
Okay, thank goodness my shellac is waxy. It's about 3 years old. So, okay, that makes sense. Look, de-waxed shellac is not in its strictly natural form, okay? And oils and waxes are, to some extent, a preservative, so it would make sense that it doesn't last necessarily as long as normal shellac would. Well, normal shellac, let's say waxed shellac. Okay, so making the cut. Nice photos you can get off the internet. So, first you dissolve it. That's the first step. You need to dissolve the flaked or the button form of shellac. Now, those of you that we've given the little bottles with shellac in, when you dissolve yours, you may realize that you might never want to use the buttons because you may never get it to dissolve. But once again, heating it up, mixing it, and so forth.
Can you grate it to make it finer?
This stuff is like peanut brittle. Yeah, so you can put it in a bag, and then
I've got shellac that's like 50 years old.
yeah, and then steal your wife's roller, and then put it in a bag and bash it, like you would do peanut brittle before it goes over your ice cream. And then you can look. When you dissolve something like this, is you dissolve the top layer, then the layer below that, and then of course it's going to take longer. So the finer it is, then of course if only this is available, but you need that color, you cope with what you have in hand. But personally, I like the flakes. I like the flakes a little bit better. So, dissolve and dilute. First you dissolve it, then you dilute it. So, for some use cases, this is too concentrated. Okay? Now, this isn't prepared using those ratios. Okay? I didn't measure anything, and I'll show you how we prepare this from, if anybody would like to volunteer their bottle of shellac that they've just gotten, so you can get free meths as well. To prep, and I'll show you how to do that.
I've got a spare one here as well.
Why do you have a spare one?
I think Mark gave it.
Is that the one that was reserved for somebody else?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, so let's use that one as the example when we get there. Hello, Umesh. Welcome. Come to the front so the people on the camera can see you. Okay, so you have your pound cut. So typically you have a pound cut and you have your dry weights in ounces. And do keep in mind that the British pound and the American pound, okay, and volumes are different as well, okay? So this is taken from an American site. I'll share the presentation. Okay, you can take a photo if you like, but I'll share the presentation. So if you sign up on that list, you get access to my newsletter, and what I'm going to do is everybody that's on the list will email or share or give a page or something that we can share that. And Jordan, I'm sure you can share it also. Okay, so guys can screen grabs and stuff. Okay, cool. So you have your pound. So this is a 1 pound cut. So that is 16 ounces dry weight of shellac. And then 1 gallon or 128 fluid ounces of your solvent. Now your solvent typically is methanol, not ethanol, okay? You use meths. South Africa, you will not get, or very rarely, unless you're very good friends with your pharmacist. I've managed to get some meths from them, but you won't easily get meths. That's not got the purple stuff in it, okay? For those in the international fraternity that are online, the reason this stuff is purple is to get people or stop people from drinking this, because it's a cheap form of alcohol, but methanol is extremely poisonous. The stuff will kill you, okay? And that's the reason they put the purple in there, is to put people off from drinking it. It does happen.
Then you can also use isopropyl alcohol to mix.
Never did, but it makes sense you would be able to.
Got a method to clear that up as well.
Yeah. Let's not share South African tradition with our international with our international viewers. But this stuff is dangerous. It will kill you. Methanol is good. Isoprop will work as well. So if in effect is you want what is called an organic solvent. Okay? Now organic solvents have the unique chemical property that they dissolve oils and waxes and so forth. And that's why this will readily work. But that is then also your volatile organic compounds, because it's an organic solvent. Okay. So of course you then can go through your different pound cuts and then different dry weights and volumes depending on what volume you want to end up with. What these guys did for us nicely is they did dry weights in grams and then your fluid volume in millimeters. So you can do your pound cuts using those ratios as well, okay, if you choose to do so. I use the easy way, and I'll show you how to do that. Back to expiry is how much is enough. Try not to make more than you need, because the moment it's dissolved, as I mentioned, clock starts ticking, okay? So there is an expiry date to your dissolved shellac. So how much is enough? Al natural. Use a date. This is from my lab days. We dated everything we opened. Okay? Date it. Then you know. So it's not, is this 6 months old? Is this 1 year? Is it whatever? Just use a permanent marker and date it. Okay? So write the date on that. So this was 23rd. I'll probably finish this in 2029. Okay, don't drink the purple stuff, please. Guys, it really, really will cause you harm. Midnight raid. So the first time I started researching shellac before I started using shellac is somebody mentioned that you have to mix it every 2 or 3 hours. And my first question is, do I have to get up at night to do it? Will it have any effect on it? And I couldn't find any confirmation, yay or nay, anywhere. So no need to get up during the night to mix it, okay? Just have it somewhere where you walk past, and every time you walk past it, just give it a swirl. Just keep it mixing. Because it dissolves, and the liquids that sit on it then become saturated with the shellac. And by dissolving it, you're just replacing it with fresh solvent, and that will mix it up. What I did with this one in particular as well is every so often I've always got a supply of ice cream sticks in the workshop, always. Just use the ice cream stick, mix it, close it up and carry on. The reason I like doing it in the canned fruit can is because the shellac doesn't go into the threads, and believe me, once it goes into the threads, trying to open it like now, and you can hear it cracking. So I didn't follow my own advice. Okay, you can hear it cracking loose. So I've got shellac in the threads. Sure, got worried there for a moment. I thought I was going to give it to one of you guys to open it up for me. So yeah, try it, and you'll find that if you use it and you open and close it and open and close it, if you don't keep the threads clean, at some point you won't be able to open it anymore. Okay, mix, 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 and mix again until it's completely dissolved. And then you end up with the good stuff. Any question? Okay, so I'll share this and you guys will be able to see the recipe if you are so inclined.
I think you just mentioned that, like, I think patience is your friend here.
Yeah.
You can't force it into mixing. It does take time, so
Yes.
you have to be patient.
Yeah.
Don't try to overmix it. I think it's going to dissolve much quicker. It's going to
Okay. Cheers, Peter.
Like I said, the difference could be between 1 day for the orange shellac to a week for the blonde.
Yeah. So patience is a virtue. One I do not have. Okay. So what I tend to do is, and I'll show you how I prepare from the sample we've got. If I find that the dissolving sort of stalls, I sort of pop in a little bit more meths and mix again, and then when it slows down, I pop in a little bit more meths. So in effect, I should have that much shellac, but I've added a little bit as I've gone along just to quicken the process. Heating it would be another option. I'm not a very patient person, so.
Do you have to mix a volume for a single coat, or do you have multi-coats?
So this is your base that you're working from. You're doing further dilutions from here. So this will actually take you quite a distance, depending on how many coats you will end up doing. So if you are regularly using shellac, have a good amount in this particular state, and then make your dilutions from here. And when you make your dilutions, then try and make as much as you're going to need. But coming back to its ease of use, shellac is one of those products that if I should paint it up to here, okay, and I continue after an hour or two, you won't see the lines. Okay, it's very forgiving in that sense. And that's why I like oil finishes as well. It has the same effect. So you won't see the lines once you carry on. Don't leave it a week though. Okay? Remember, your shellac provides a certain level of UV protection. UV affects the color of your wood in the long run, and you may end up in a place where you may see some differentiation, especially if it was exposed to a lot of light. The golden rule of finishes is it's like a glue up. Okay? Don't start a glue up when you've got a pot of pasta on the stove, because you're either going to burn your pasta or screw up your glue up. Okay? It's the same with your finishes. If you're going to finish, set up the time to finish. Start your finishing, and as far as you can, complete your finishing, or at least complete it to a stage where you deliver the piece to the customer and it looks a little bit different at the bottom of the tabletop, they wouldn't know. Okay. I hope none of my customers are online. Okay, but generally you wouldn't see it. So plan it, but if you end up running out of your prepared batch, there's no problem in preparing more to complete the process you're busy with, but do be sure that you use the same dilution factors when you prepare your next batch. Okay? Because if you do this half-half and the next batch you do 1/3 and 2/3 solution, your color consistency is not going to be the same. You may get away on a dark wood, okay, but you may not necessarily get away on a lighter wood. So, what French polish isn't? Sorry, I need to apologize again. Okay? Oh, what shellac isn't? It's not French polish. Okay? French polish is the technique that is used to apply shellac. Just like brushing on is a technique, just like spray painting is a technique. Okay? In our culture, French polish is shellac. No, it isn't. Shellac is the finish, and French polish is a technique used to apply it. Okay, the one can't really live without the other one, but it's not necessarily the same thing. So French polish, I'm really glad I got that photo. So typically, and I've never done French polish, maybe I should try it. So you take an absorbent cloth, you fold it. In some cultures or in some areas, some specialists, there's even a very special technique by which they fold it. Okay? Umesh, you would know. Okay? They fold it, they saturate that in the shellac. Then it gets transferred to a different cloth, sometimes of a different material or what have you. And they rolled up, and as you apply the pressure, you wring the finish from the first coated cloth. That soaks into the outer one, and that is how you use it to apply. Okay? And you do it in a very even circular motion. Okay? To apply it evenly to the product. You then leave it to dry, and then you do the next coat. The beauty of French polish, it builds up surface on top of surface on top of surface on top of surface. So effectively what you're doing is you're applying wet shellac with your organic solvent or your alcohol, and what that does is it actually dissolves the very top layer or two layers of your previously applied shellac. Okay? And it builds the surface, and it builds it layer by layer by layer by layer. And you can see the flakes, okay? They've got a nice shine to them, and that's the resins and the waxes that causes that shine. And that's what gives you that very characteristic, I can see my face in the surface of my table finish. That's how it builds up. So effectively, you're building up a polished coat on top of a very polished coat on top of a very polished coat, and that builds up, and that gives you your finish. I have heard and I have read in my previous research when I was wanting to do to spray paint some of my furniture pieces is that one of the easier ways to get to a French polish look using shellac is by spray painting it. Because effectively you've got a very fine mist sitting on top of a previous surface, melting into that surface, and you then build it up like that. And apparently, it works well. Never tried it, never done it. I wouldn't be able to confirm either way. Okay? But that's the technique of applying shellac so that you can get to a kind of finish like that. Okay. Just a note, I don't know if I've mentioned it. We'll cover it a little bit later. Other way. We're almost there. We are an hour in. Would you guys like to take a break? Quick break?
Can we hear about how you remove the mess from the...
Okay, so just for our international watchers, so yeah. Yes, you can.
Not the bread method though.
Yeah, but I need to give a little bit of context. So this is a cheap form of alcohol that people used to and still drink as a cheap alternative to commercially available alcohol. The South African government, very, very long time ago, then started putting the purple color in it and convincing people that it's poisonous, not because of the liquid that is in here, but because of the purple. That the addition of the purple makes this poisonous, and therefore it should not be drunk. The homebrew solution to resolving that is taking a loaf of bread, pouring this over a loaf of bread, and having the bread filter it and taking away the purple. And the only thing you're taking away is the color. You're not taking away the poison. And that was an easy way that the guys used to do that. And so much so that for some time, I think it's about 4 or 5 years ago, you actually weren't able to find any methylated spirits in any grocery store in South Africa. You had to go to specialty hardware stores. I see it's now changed. You can get methylated spirits again in the normal retailers. Yeah.
The supermarkets limit the number of bottles you can buy.
As well, yeah. So it is sad that alcohol use and abuse in our country is rife. And there are ways that people will try and get away around that. The purple color, I found that the purple color, the concentration of the purple in the shellac doesn't adversely affect the final color of your finish. So it's not necessarily critical that you remove the dye from the spirits before you use it. Okay, now we've got context. How do you get it clear?
Go to an aquatic pet store, right, where they sell fish. You buy a bag of
Activated charcoal.
activated granular charcoal. Granular, it has to be granular charcoal, not powdery. And then you chuck about 50 or 100 grams of that into the bottle, and in about a week that thing clears up. It's clear as then.
Yeah. So,
And you just filter it out through a coffee pot.
yeah.
And you can reuse that charcoal to continue.
Yeah. So, back to my history of hobbies and research. When I was at school, I did a lot of fish keeping and breeding. And if you got white spot on your fish, you put methylated blue in your tank, but you had to remove the activated charcoal because it takes the meds. And it's still the case. If you put any meds into your fish tanks, you have to remove any activated charcoal because it does absorb the stuff. But that's a very good idea. So if anybody is especially sensitive about not having the purple in their meths, that is a good idea. Of course, we also get activated charcoal at health shops because we drink it, it sits in our stomach, and it also absorbs all kinds of nasties and chemicals and stuff like that. So that,
Granular type seems to be quite specific to
yeah,
pet stores. I think you struggle to get the granular type at a...
yeah, it's difficult to swallow.
It looks like coffee. It looks like Nescafe, not Nescafe coffee granular.
It's different granules, yes. Yeah, you can get them and they're cheap.
To take activated charcoal because it also absorbs all the vitamins and the good stuff that's in the stomach. It's a complete health food, fantasy, and
Listen,
great.
I'm a meat eater, and I hope I don't offend anybody when I say so, but I listened to an interview with a well-known South African dietitian, and she said, I have yet to meet a healthy vegetarian. I agree.
One of my staff members eats only eggs and lamb. That's the exclusive diet. He says he's never had more energy in his life. He's healthy. He takes a cold shower every morning.
Yeah,
Even in the winter.
So can you make that mix even thinner? Would it make the layer even thinner?
next step. Yeah, next step. So because you don't use it like this, you thin this down further.
Another container.
That's what we're going to be demonstrating.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're quickly going to take a quick break. If you want to give me your details, you're more than welcome. And then are we on break on? Okay. Are we off? maybe. Okay. Is that everybody? Yeah. Welcome back. So we've got a slide or two left, and then we'll do the quick demonstration, show you how easy it is to apply, and how we go about doing it. I think we might be waiting. Are we waiting for anybody else to join us?
Just my wife.
Okay. And the gentleman that was sitting here. Jordan, a minute. Jordan, we good?
Sorry.
Okay. No, it's not a problem at all. I'm actually going much quicker than I thought. Usually we carry on about 1:45, and then I still have to do my shopping, and then I have to stay open for me. So, yes. So,
I use that method, it's very good.
so you do French polish?
Well, I use that, but not that I fill it and squeeze it, I dip it
Yes.
and use.
And how do you find?
And then I go in a straight line
Okay.
and coat after coat.
And you get this level of finish?
Yes,
How many coats do you do?
like 50.
Yeah. So,
You don't actually do the polishing.
yeah.
Because I've tried that and it was completely disaster. I just
Yeah. It really depends on how wet you have your applicator, because it dries so quickly that by the time you come around, it actually starts getting sticky, and then it becomes a mess.
That's when you stop and you dip again.
Yes. And what's nice is when it gets streaky, if you reapply, you can smoothen it out again because it dissolves that surface. And then you continue. So, I admit I'm knocking French polish as a technique, mainly because I've never used it. I've never seen the value in using it in any of the furniture pieces that I've made. It's never been a requirement from any one of my customers. But I think there's something to be said for, and you may be able to confirm that, or attest to it, is there's something satisfying, quite satisfying, in getting to see your face in something like that. In your case, you restore a lot of pianos. So a lot of those pianos are French polished.
For the French polish pianos, we actually send it out to have it done.
To have it done.
We don't do the refinishing but we
Okay.
mainly for the soundboard and other things we need to paint.
So coming back to the fact that there are specialists that specializing in doing that.
I guess your environment must be absolutely dust because you don't want to capture any dust.
Yes and no, because you can actually knock it down again if you need to. So it's quite forgiving to knock it down and get to the blemishes and so forth. Of course, it becomes more of an issue when you spray paint. Dust and that kind of stuff becomes a bigger issue when you spray paint. You watch YouTube videos, sometimes you watch these guys redo cars, and they spray paint it to an incredible finish in their backyard. And it's like, how do you guys do it? So yeah.
Because they don't use HD camera to show you the close-up of
Yeah. I still wouldn't turn a 69 Mustang down if I had it. So yeah. So I know I'm knocking French polish, okay? But just wanted to clarify that the product that's a way of applying it. There's nothing wrong with the finish. There may be something wrong. We'll have a look at it now. So putting it on. So another one that I actually found quite nicely is it actually gives you your pound cuts. Now I wasn't able to get that in metric, but if you use your pound cuts and you relate that to the previous graphic I showed you, it actually shows you for each one of those pound cuts what the general use case would be. So if you want to do a light wash coat to mitigate stain and blotching, it's a ½ pound cut. So it's quite dilute. And then you go up from there. So you can do a medium wash coat or airbrush, specifically if you're doing airbrush, or you're doing French polishing, you're using a high volume, low pressure gun. So it breaks down all of those use cases and the necessary pound cuts. So once again, it may be subject to change because once you're working with a natural product. So therefore some experimentation may be required. But this will give you something to aim at, to start at, which is quite useful. And as you can see, French polishing is a single pound cut. So that is already relatively concentrate, but it actually goes up from there. You can even go as far as sealing up knots. So I use resin to seal up knots. If it's fresh enough and thick enough, you can get it into a knot and it will dry.
The formula I use, I read it somewhere, it's 15 grams of shellac to 100 grams
Of liquid, so it's
of
by weight.
1 pound cut.
Yeah, so it's by weight. Yeah. So once again, ballpark. And you'll see when I prep this, okay, that volume-wise, sort of close enough. Okay, so baking is one of the hardest things you can do in the kitchen because you need to stick to the recipe, otherwise it will flop. Your margins in baking is quite close. Okay? If you make your favorite pasta sauce today, you can put a cup of oil. Tomorrow you can do a little bit less or whatever. You can change it. So this is very similar to making pasta, okay, or cooking. You can either be very precise and very accurate, and it works for you, or good enough. Don't let good enough, or don't let perfect stand in the way of good enough. But then again, if somebody's paying you a lot of money to refurbish a piece of furniture that's been in the family for 200 years, it requires a certain level of care that you may not necessarily use for anything else. Okay. So how do you apply it? You can use a brush. Now, I love Paul Sellers. Okay, I love Rob Cosman. I love the English woodworker the most. I share a birthday with Paul Sellers. That's why I like his humor. Okay, I don't ascribe to everything Paul says. Two things I do. One is I've got a rag and a can. He uses a rag and a can on all his hand planes and stuff. That keeps the rust off. And the other thing is his application technique when he uses shellac. He uses what is called a hake brush. This is a hake brush. Believe it or not, I think this might have changed, but this brush is harder to source than shellac. Okay, I found one place in Durban that shipped them online. I ordered them, but they're becoming more readily available. If I'm not mistaken, my father is a painter. He lives and is retired down at the coast. He's a painter, but he does acrylics. I like water paints. Apparently, hake brushes are used for water painting. Okay, it's natural fibers, highly absorbent, and really, really nice to apply shellac with. So Paul Sellers taught me this, and I really do like the hake brush. When I wasn't able to find the hake brush, I tried using these. These have got synthetic brushes, and they just turn into goo. I don't know if it's a solvent that does that, or the waxes and the resins in the shellac that does it, but this goes, use it once, you chuck it. These I've used and washed multiple times. You just use it in myths. It's easy as that. Okay? Then after you do it, and you wash it in methylated spirit, it's always good to wash your brushes in the carrier solution that carries your finish. because it dissolves the finish, therefore it will take it out of the brush, and it's sometimes a good idea to wash it with soap and water and let it dry. Ideally, don't dry it like this, because the water drains into your wood and makes it go off. Ideally, you should dry a brush like this. Okay, that's what you get from watching people do painting and stuff on YouTube as well. I spend a lot of time on YouTube. So,
What is it called? A hake,
hake brush.
like the fish.
Yeah, exactly like the fish, hake brush. And you can get them in different sizes. So art shops, I do believe, do stock them now, and you should be able to get them available. And if you don't, search online and you'll find them there. Okay? Afrikaans people, a lappie. That's just a little cloth. And apply.
Can I make a note on the brushes? By the way, when you say that cheap brush that you bought, is that like a builder's brush or a Leroy Merlin brush?
It's an art shop brush.
Is it? Because you do get synthetics, like really high quality synthetics.
Yes.
Because the synthetic material, you know, is designed to be chemical resistant. I mean, like if you're into 3D printing, you'll know the cheapest thing to print with is PLA, but it's not resistant to anything. So if you go, you know, a little bit more expensive, you get PTG, and that will be highly chemically resistant. So if you know, you can ask an art specialist about a brush that will be chemically resistant. You know, you should be able to get something that's not necessarily natural fiber. Those will inherently usually way more expensive.
Yeah. Just for the guys online, just a comment in regards to the suitability of higher quality synthetic brushes to be able to apply shellac. And although I agree with you that that's a good option, there's just something about these that makes applying shellac easier. And I've used the high quality stuff, and I've tried to, and what have you, but there's just something about using these hake brushes that work. I don't know if it's their capacity to carry the finish, the volumes of finish you carry, because coming back to the way that you apply your French polish and not getting the streaking and applying so that it doesn't get dry in the application process. Literally, it dries so fast that I can do a stroke and the next stroke will actually drag and stick. You can feel it sticking on the surface. And it's just, using a brush like these, the amount of finish it carries, it just takes a lot of that hassle away. And this works really, really, really well. So if you are going to be looking at applying with a brush shellac, I would strongly suggest looking at getting one of these. Okay. If you are impatient and you don't want to wait for this to ship from wherever, try the high quality synthetic brushes. They do work, but there's just something about these brushes that work well. Don't know why.
There's that you know, thing with usually when you spray paint or something, whatever, they always say, you know, you go a light first coat and then you go with a wet coat. But I think with shellac it's the other way around. Almost like you do a wet coat and then after that you get thinner coats.
Yeah, it would. And once again, not using it readily, and often in my own workshop, I can't really attest to that. I do know that every time I've tried to apply it with a little cloth, it gets sticky, it gets messy, and it just gets not a pleasant finish to work with. Okay, in spite of everybody touting it as such an easy finish to use. But the moment I started using this brush, I'm less adverse, shall we say, to using something like shellac. They do work. I do like them. You can use a roller and you can use a spray gun. Now, let's park this comment about it not being the perfect solution, because there are some use cases where you would like to avoid shellac. Okay, so we'll cover them. It's a in balance. Shellac has got more advantages than disadvantages, but there are certain places where you may want to use something else to finish something. Okay, so let's do the demo quickly. So this is not filtered. Who asked me if it was filtered? Who measured it? It wasn't filtered. It's just so old. It's actually bleached. So the person who uses the most myths in my house is my wife, not to drink. She's got a whiteboard over her desk, and that gets rid of all the marks and the pen marks and whatever. You note I haven't used their whiteboard yet. I've been known to use permanent markers on their board because I get confused between my markers and permanent markers. So that takes it away. So really, as much as you would like. Okay? Percentage-wise, out of a bag, okay, you can weigh it. So do be careful when you do weigh it, and you weigh it in this particular container and you put it on your scale. Zero your scale first, otherwise you need to make calculations to determine what weight you have in there. Don't like calculations in particular, okay? Never been all that good with maths. So make sure you zero your scale before you weigh it in, okay? If you're going to go by weight, so zero your scale, put in the weight that you want, zero it again, so that you only get the weight on your spirits if you're going to be weighing it like that. That just brings you back to zero, okay? Putting in too little, good idea. Putting in too much, difficult to take it back out again, but once again, not going to be the end of the world. If you want to have specific dilutions and you have this to dilute, make your solution that you're going to be using, make that then a little bit more concentrated than you otherwise would. But once again, experiment. So put in as much as you'd like. So what should I use? My stuff or hardware center stuff that was free? Let me use my stuff. Okay. So how much do you put in? Okay, you add your liquid just so that you cover. Okay, that may be a little bit too much. Okay, a slight bit too much. Okay, but you only cover the flakes. That's all you need to do. I'm going to send this around so you can see what you end up with. So that is now what you leave it, you mix it, you leave it, you mix it, you leave it, you mix it. Every few hours, put in a place where you walk past it so that you don't forget about it. Okay? Now, it gets like toffee at the bottom. So the flakes will dissolve, the resins become one, and it settles at the bottom, and it gets like a puck. Very similar to this. Gets like toffee at the bottom. Okay? So just keep mixing it. When it gets to the point where it's just like toffee, put a swizzle stick or ice cream stick in there, mix it up, and see if it becomes any less. If it doesn't become any less, leave it for a longer time, put it in a place where it's a little bit warmer, it more readily dissolves into your solvent, or add a little bit more and mix it. Okay? But what you want is, in effect, almost volume-wise, a 1-to-1 ratio. Okay? What pound cut is it? I have no idea. You can take your ratios back to the pound cuts. So here, if you know what the weight is of the shellac that you've put in, and you know what the volume is ballpark of the solution you've put in there, you can deduce what pound cut you have. Okay? Guys, keep in mind, I'm not doing a French polish. So accuracy in regards to my dilutions and solutions and so forth isn't as critical as it may be in your case. Okay? Do you strictly stay with pound cut?
Yeah.
You do. Yeah. So for a technique as finicky and as technically demanding as French polish, I would suggest sticking to the recipes that are available.
I think that's about a 2.5 pound cut. I'm not sure, but I've always mixed it that way. I usually just cover the flakes.
Yeah.
Whatever I need, if I need it thin, I just mix out some from there.
Yeah. There's the ratio between the two is there's likely more shellac than liquid in this particular solution. So this will be likely higher than a single pound cut. Yeah. It's not exactly a 1-to-1 ratio. Okay. Any questions so far? Okay. It's really as easy as that. Okay. Then, so you're the lucky one. There was one left. So you not only get free shellac, you also get free meths.
How long do I have to use this now?
2 months.
Yeah, so what did you say, Jordan? What prepared, it's about 2 months? 3 to 6 months prepped. Okay. So the clock's ticking. better start making furniture.
So unopened shellac plates last 1 to 2 years.
The dark,
Waxy shellac can last up to 5 years. Mixed waxy shellac can last 1 to 2 years.
okay, so what? Yeah, so once it's mixed, the clock's ticking. So that bedside table your wife's been nagging you about, time to build it.
But I mean, realistically though, it's no different for shellac than any other solvent stuff you keep in your house. But most of my stuff, after a year, I'd be hesitant to use it if it was just sitting in.
Yes and no, depends on the finish. So I've got oil-based finishes, Pro Nature, no shelf life. Leave it in the can, open it up, take the film off, mix it, use it.
But the stuff will go rancid because it's natural oil.
It's a hardening oil. It's a hardening vegetable oil. So linseed oil-based products and tung oil-based products, just finished thought, do not go rancid because they dry.
Rubio's got linseed in it.
Yes. Pro Nature's got linseed in as well. So the only two natural vegetable oils, to my knowledge, that dry, they call them hardening oils, is linseed oil and tung oil. Any other vegetable oil will go rancid.
Okay, so there was just a comment about the hake brushes. So hake brushes are available at P&A stationers for those of us in South Africa.
Okay. One of my favorite, P&A. So go to the art section, they may have it. Another place that I do know, if you're in the Gauteng area, is a art and craft shop called Her Annie's. H-E-R, Annie. They are in Centurion, close to the Unitas Hospital, if you're familiar with the area. So, okay, so they are readily available. Really, make the investment. Umesh?
Then you mentioned about heating it up to your object as well. Guys, be careful, not an open plate, open plate, use a water bath, hot water, boiling water,
Yeah.
heat up, heat the container.
Yeah. Also, do not put a closed bottle while heating it up. Air expands, pressure cookers. Okay, safety. Okay, so, and when we talk about heating it up, so what you mentioned is what's typically called a double boiler. So, no offense, but none of us have small babies anymore. But baby bottle warmers work really well. I use my baby bottle warmer to make my hide glue when I build my chairs. So I have access to those kind of things. But even just taking a glass bowl, pouring hot water in it and putting the open container in it will work. But honestly, walk by it, mix it, swizzle stick, a little bit more. Unless you're in a hurry, I probably wouldn't heat it. I don't know if you would concur. Yeah.
My workshop is fully rancid.
Yeah, it's summertime again.
Actually, my kitchen, so we were trying to germinate seeds, and in my kitchen, I put a light under the, where the plates are, the cupboard where the plates are. And there's a little LED light. I didn't realize the thing warms the cupboard up. So it's about 32 degrees in the cupboard, just above where this light is, the plates.
Yeah.
So if I leave it in there,
So we have an attendee in class who germinates seeds in his kitchen. We shall not ask any further questions. I'm teasing you.
no, it's Savannah, she grows vegetables. So
Okay.
we live in a slot.
It is legal in South Africa. So my wife grows microgreens in the kitchen windowsill. So I know temperatures and germinations and so forth. I've actually, another hobby, I've also dabbled in hydroponics and aquaponics and kind of stuff like that because we always like that kind of stuff. And it's cool. So yeah, I've got lots of hobbies. But anyway, so in time, give it a date, you will get to this point. Okay. Now, if you know what your pound cut is and if it is important for you, and if you've prepped it using the pound cuts, this would not be relevant for you. Okay. We want to use shellac and we want to use it easily. this is one of the easiest way to do it. Okay, now we need to thin this further before we use it. Okay, now this may be suitable for your higher pound cut uses. Once again, experiment. Okay, see, let's say you want to do general finishing or brushing on or wiping and padding it on. See if it works for you and see if that concentration works for you. Next time around, if it's too thin, add a few more flakes. If it's too thick, I wouldn't add more liquid to this because you may want this high concentration. Just thin it in a different container before you use it. Okay? So
That concentration is pretty ideal for spraying.
spraying. Yeah.
You can just go straight in spray.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I did, and it worked out, pretty well.
Once again, up to you. Okay. So the very scientific way of doing it. You can make a mark if you'd like. Yeah, I feel like a science teacher. Expecting explosion. And it's very obvious that we are now heading towards blonde. Okay? You can see the color. Okay? So that is now blonde. I don't know if you guys want to have a look at it. Of course, if you're using any one of the other colors, this will be darker than what I am now, and once you've diluted it, it will be even darker than that. But it's really that easy. Would I French polish with that? I don't know. If it works, maybe. But then again, consistency. Okay? Are you going to get consistent results using that? I'm not expecting perfectly consistent results because I'm not doing any French polish techniques. But that is good enough for me for jewelry boxes or display boxes or a frame or something like that.
So what you're saying is if you're going to layer upon layer upon layer, it all needs to be the same consistency?
No.
It can be thinner and thinner and thinner.
Yes.
Oh,
Okay. What you want on a layer, let's say this is a dining room table.
Yeah.
You don't want 1 pound cut here and start with a ½ pound cut there.
Yeah, but you could go, if you
You can do a 1 pound cut, finish, and then have thinner coats as you go from there. Yes. But on a single piece of wood, you don't want differentiation there.
Do you mix anything into a shellac for grain filling purposes?
No. I don't fill grains. I like it. So I like having the open grains, and I like open grain species. So I'm particularly fond of ash. I like working in ash, and I like the way it finishes. And then again, if you look at my preferred finish, is I do oil-based, tinted oil-based, and those pigments go and sit in the grain, and I get effects that I prefer. So that's
For the people that do want to do it, do you have a suggestion?
no, because I never do it. So I'd be speaking about what I've managed to read, but you fill, do you not? You do.
I do.
You use the
various-
pumice.
I do, but I get various opinions about this. Because one guy will say, no, use baby powder, what they call talc or something.
Yeah, talc powder is quite common.
And that also don't use pumice.
Yeah.
But as far as I understand, some of the oldest violins still in existence had pumice powder mixed into the shellac that they used, or the damalac. I don't know if you know
Yeah.
damalac, which is a tree resin very similar to shellac.
No, I don't. So the other thing is as well, is, and just for the guys online, we're discussing the fact that you have pieces of furniture or pieces of or instruments that have been in use, active use, for hundreds of years, and they still use the same finish. And the grains were filled with pumice and a mixture of shellac, and you get a paste, you put it on, you sand it down. And the other thing is as well, is, and it's something that we often forget, is pumice then, pumice now, may not necessarily be chemically the same. And we live in a modern world where our manufacturing techniques and processes have become so accurate and so clean and so forth, where a what's the word I'm looking for? Where an impurity in another product could have contributed to its usefulness when it was used. And because those components are no longer in the component, we may not always get the same kind of finishes that we got at that time.
I'm not sure what the talc does, but I know that with the pumice that the use of it's supposed to be not, it wasn't necessarily the pumice itself all the grain, because they didn't actually have that super fine pumice 200 years ago. But the finest pumice they had was gritty enough that in the finish, as you were working it, doing your French polishing, what it would do is it would abrade the surface and basically create like microfine dust of the wood that you were busy applying the finish to, and then the microfine dust would fill the pores, and that's how you got, you know, a very consistent color across your work and stuff, instead of having white pumicey holes. But we, for instance, just brush it on, and we use superfine pumice to then, instead of having to the superfine pumice, and we work against spruce, quite a white wood, so you don't see any.
So just again for the guys online, we're talking about using pumice to fill grain before we carry on the finish. And it effectively comes down to the fact that pumice, the powder itself, is your filler. So that fills the gap. And your shellac is the binder. It keeps it all together. And it's the same as using a sanding sealer with dust and filling your gaps, and that's the same way wood fillers work. Okay, you've got a carrier you've got a filler that fills the space, and then you have your binder that binds it all together and make that harden and making that a unit. That's how resins and the powders and the colors and everything works in resins, although the color doesn't fill the gap. And that's why wood glue, okay, is not a filler. Wood glue will not fill a gap. Shouldn't. It's not what it's supposed to do. What makes wood glue strong is it penetrates the grain, and when the two surfaces come together, it binds the two surfaces together, and that provides you strength. Okay? The moment you have a gap, wood glue is weak. And if you're going to have a glue that needs to fill a gap and glue two pieces of together, you're likely better off using something like an epoxy. Okay? Because an epoxy strength is not mainly dependent on two surfaces touching one another. So it can fill the gap if it should. Okay? So there's a get out of free jail card for us. But wood glue strength is edge to edge. And it's something that we need to consider in regards what is a filler and what is a binder when we work and do woodworking, and keep all of those things in mind. But the powder is your filler. That's what fills the gap. And your shellac is the binder that keeps it all together. And the secret is having a combination of those two things that is easily sandable and that you can work down and sand to an even surface. There's no point in using a fine gravel or sand as a filler when you can't sand it down. And that's the advantage that something like pumice or something else may offer. And that's why often when you talk about fillers and stuff, they often talk about easily sandable, because there's nothing as bad as having to sand down something that you filled up just to get a nice even surface. Okay, so where's our mix? On to painting. Thank you. So this couldn't be simpler. So let's use, no, I'm not going to get that into the bottle. And it's really just the case. Yeah, you guys can, would you guys like to come closer? Jordan, can we do that? It's, as long as they leave a gap in the middle. Okay, so you guys can come and have a look, but we just need to leave a gap for the camera to see. Okay, so I've now done 2 strokes with this. I could do another, but it's really... water cup. There we go.
So you're putting on another coat immediately.
There's no technical reason for doing any particular, but you can, as we stand here and look at, you can see the sheen go off it, which means it's drying already. It's practically gone.
Yeah.
Okay, so by the time it's back here, I can do another coat.
Amazing.
The other thing you can do is give it a sniff, and the moment you don't smell the solvent anymore, that means it's flashed off completely, so therefore the resin should be dry. If you turn it around, you can see the color that it's given the wood, but again, it's really a simple case. Now don't be fooled, this is not going to stay shiny, so you're not going to have that, there's quite a nice figure on this wood, but it's going to finish to a nice, if not satin, sheen. Okay, now this is stinkwood. It's a local South African species. Now, it may be more dense than the maple, so it may take longer to dry.
One thing that's insane about this is how it highlights that buoyancy in the wood. Crazy.
So this still smells slightly,
And it's still a little bit sticky.
but okay, now you will still see a sheen because this is hand plane. So the grain here is sliced. It's not braided like sanding. So, but we are ready. And you can keep adding coats until you're bored.
And of course it'll take longer now to...
It will take longer because your wood is sealed. So part of it drying quickly is the finish going into the wood and therefore drying a little bit quicker. It wicks into the wood. But it's really as simple as that.
Is there any sanding between surfaces?
You can sand slightly between surfaces, but if you're going for a very, very smooth finish, at some point there's a point of diminishing returns, because remember, you now need to fill the material that you've removed away, so you're not getting that nice shine.
It's the mess dissolves the top surface.
Yeah. Yeah, it gets dry. So the question is do you then sand it?
With the mess smooths it out.
Yes, because it melts into your prior coat. Yes. So you lose that effect if you start sanding your surface.
I typically just do twice with the fine shellac. Give it a sand with a 320 and an orbital, and then I go over it with the Osmo. So I don't have to worry about how it's going to end up looking if I end up finishing with shellac.
Yeah. So remember, the only reason you would need to sand shellac is to key the surface again for your follow-up applications. So that gives you maybe a smoother finish, if you like. So in your case, you would then apply the shellac, and on top of the shellac, you apply an oil finish. So it's less important what the shellac looks like, because to some extent, the oil repairs whatever sanding marks or scratch marks, is the correct name, whatever scratch marks you have that you need to apply on top of that.
Even with the key tops, we end up matting the key tops off with the fine steel. So, you know.
Once again, keying the surface so that
But
the
we don't
shellac
do anything
sticks.
over it then, that's the finish.
Oh, okay.
We go for that slightly
Matte
satin.
finish, satin look, yeah. So different use cases. So all you do in this case, and I was supposed to bring something along to wash in, and I'll use one of the water cups. All you do is you put your solvent into an empty cup. Okay, put it into an empty cup. Water, a little bit of water is not going to have an effect, really. Your percentage of water to alcohol is really not all that important. And doing that a few times is simply good enough. Let it dry. If you want to, you can wash it with a little bit of soap and water, and the brush will last.
Forget to clean it, not a big deal.
Yeah.
Stick it into alcohol before you...
Yes. That's another nice thing about shellac, is if you do forget to clean it, it readily dissolves in the solvent. So if you forget to clean your brush, you can, a day or two afterwards, you can still clean your brush, yes.
I did once come upon a forum where they were discussing what happens if you're using old mats, because mats is hygroscopic and eventually it will absorb. So in high humidity environments, it's better to use fresh mats than use very old mats that might have absorbed too much water.
Right.
Because that might lead to worse results for your.
Yeah.
So I guess if you're doing high quality French polishing, you might want to.
Yeah.
You know.
You want your components, and it's back to the analogy of cooking. Is why does Italian food, traditional Italian food, taste so nice? It is because of the fresh produce that they use to make it, and it's the same. Your final quality finish is very much dependent on the quality of the raw materials you put into it. So, yes. Okay. So a really good finish, a really versatile finish, relatively easily to apply depending on the technique you're going to use. Is it a perfect finish? Unfortunately, it is not. There's a reason why high-class furniture isn't all finished in French polish. Okay? Using French polish is difficult to do if you're going that route. But if you've got a high-class piece of furniture and you're having a dinner party and your best friend has a tumbler of really expensive whiskey, and it goes over the side and he puts it down on the top, you will have a ring. Alcohol. It will dissolve the finish and it will leave a mark. And spot repairing a French polish surface is not something you just do on a Friday afternoon. So it does have its advantages and it does have very clear disadvantages depending on its use case and where you are going to be using it. So doing a French polish on a showpiece, doing French polish on an everyday piece of furniture, it's not going to withstand the wear. It's got some resistance to wear, but there are much better products available today for items that will see a lot of wear. We have a restorer amongst us. Often, restorations require that you stick to the same finish that it was originally restored in. So that is a use case for something like a French polish or shellac. But honestly, for utility items in the modern home, there are better solutions. Unless you like the look, unless you like the exclusivity, and show the Joneses next door that you've got a high-class piece of furniture, there are much better finishes, and there are better finishes that give you the same look or a similar look. And that will generally be your polyurethanes and your varnishes and so forth. You can get very close. And it's fashion. Some decades we like shiny furniture, other decades we don't. If you take, what do they call, there was a stage, they call it, it's after the high-class French, high-class furniture, there's, I think it was the craft movement. And they moved away from the high polish, high gloss, fancy, curly, square and functional and what have you. So it's also a case of fashion. I would, for instance, use shellac on, and you can see here, this is first coat, and you can see the sheen. So if you'd like to protect that, I would put an oil finish on that, but keeping in mind that natural oil finishes are matte, so it will take some of that sheen away unless you use an oil finish with a high wax amount. Or even put a, the other word, a wax bomb, or a wax with canuba wax and beeswax. Put that on and you buff it, and that will give you a yes, Cobra floor polish. Cobra floor polish is really good to maintain the working surfaces of your machines and stop rust. Not so good for furniture, no, because of its chemical content. And it's because it doesn't have natural oils in it and waxes in it, it doesn't feed your wood, it actually ends up drying it. It's like asking somebody how much water do you drink, and they say they drink 5 cups of coffee. Coffee is a diuretic, it actually takes water out of you, it doesn't put water into you, so it's sort of the inverse of what it would do. So if you're going to be applying a polish, I would suggest something like a paste wax, and it's polish, it's not really a polish, but put on paste wax that's got natural oils and waxes in it. That will both protect and feed your surface.
And so what brand would you recommend?
Pro Nature. So of all the suppliers or makers of oil finishes, Pro Nature is the only guys who actually have in their line of products, they actually have a wax bar. So
Interesting, because we applied Pro Nature to some outside stuff. And it turned very black, the wood, from the sun. Okay, it was full sun.
that could be the sun. And what color did you?
It was the clear.
Yeah, so the clear provides no, and this is generally for, I just want to finish, so generally for all oil finishes, if you're going to use it outdoor, clear, doesn't matter the manufacturer, lets through too much UV light. So ideally you want something with a stain, because the pigmentation in the oil provides a block and then provides additional protection to whatever you apply it to. If you say it turned black, the first thing I wanted to ask you is, didn't you use the ebonizing liquid? Because the ebonizing liquid will make it black.
To be fair, I think none of these products are designed for outside use unless there's a specific part of the product that is made, it explicitly says it's for outside use.
Okay.
Pretty much all of these oil finishes are for inside.
So as far as Pro Nature specifically goes, they've got a line of indoor and specifically manufactured outdoor products as well. Okay. Question?
Philip just says, sorry, been away for a while, maybe Dylan covered this already. How do you clean these brushes with shellac on it? Do you put it in methylated spirits?
Yes, just methylated spirits and swizzle it around until you've got the excess of shellac out. It's like Umesh mentioned as well. You don't necessarily need to do it immediately. If you forget, it's not a train smash. It will dissolve it. And what I like to do with all my brushes is once I've cleaned it up, I will take roll, I will put the brush onto the paper and I just gently squeeze it to remove the excess. And I may then sometimes go and wash this with a warm soap and water. Sunlight liquid will work, and that will clean it up nicely. Yes.
Soap and water doesn't do much. You do a different kind of solvent. It helps take the solvent out of the brush.
Yeah. So it's just a case of what works. Yeah. So I like washing my brushes with a soapy solution, especially the expensive ones. I find that they're less sticky and they're easier to use and they last longer. I learned this from, once again, the art world rather than the woodworking world.
I keep the brushes specifically.
You could as well. I tend to forget what brush I used for what, so I can barely remember what I had for breakfast. So yeah, you could do that as well.
So I've inherited a whole bunch of shellac, but in the pellet form from my father. It must be at least 50 years old. Will I be still able to use it?
According to the 5-year limit, no. Is it going to be a piece that somebody inherits? See, as he mentioned again, if it stays tacky, test it. If it stays tacky, it doesn't dry, so therefore not a good idea to use it. Test it. Guys, any finish that you are going to use on a piece of furniture, you either test it on a piece of wood or you test it on the bottom of a tabletop, but test it.
Mark in the chat also said mixed shellac stored in a garage lasts about 18 to 24 months in contact. Storing inside the house lasts about twice as long. I think it must be to do with the temperature and consistency.
Yeah, it could very well be. Just a little story. So I've mentioned Pro Nature quite a few times. I work with Pro Nature, I use their products. And because they're a South African product and manufacturer, I do like using their products and working with them. I wanted to try their wax balm because I used to make my own. So I used to make my own wax balm from natural turpentine. So natural turpentine is originally made from pine gum. They distill it from pine gum. So you use natural terps. It's now, I think, 180 rand, South African rands for a bottle like this. That was last quote. It's extremely expensive. And then I get my beeswax and boiled linseed oil, and I'll put them in a double boiler, and I used to make my own. And I used to have them at the hardware center show. Until I made up a batch one Sunday afternoon, and I set my kitchen alight. Okay, and I was using a double boiler. But as I was pouring it over, I've got a gas hob. Got into the gas hob, and the flames just went. Thankfully, about 2 weeks before that, I decided my workshop needs a fire extinguisher. So I had a fire extinguisher on hand. So, like it on a Sunday afternoon to go and have a nap after lunch, my wife went on a nap and I was cleaning the kitchen because there was white powder everywhere. So I decided I'm not making my own wax balm anymore, so I started using the Pro Nature wax balm. And I had a bottle, unopened bottle, and I had it close to the wall in my garage in summer. It got so hot that it actually boiled out of the bottle. When I got to the bottle, almost a quarter of what was inside came past the lid and was on the outside of the bottle. So heat also can affect very much. And this will not dry as fast in wintertime as it does in summertime. It will not wick off. And now you can feel here, now this could be the shellac, this could be the brush, this could be something, but you'll feel that the surface is dry, but not smooth. And so that's where the smooth movements when applying it then becomes important. Okay? No. Well, it felt like the other side of the piece of wood. It was smooth, smooth, smooth. So that could be my shellac. Remember, my shellac is relatively old. Okay? The other thing could be the surface, could be dust, it could be the brush, it could be the way I applied it. So what I would do in a case like this is I would apply multiple coats, and then, that's me, I would take 000 steel wool with the wax balm, and I'll work that over the shellac. That's how I would do it. Okay, but I would lose the sheen. Well, not as much, because the wax balm has a lot of solid waxes in it, so that provides some parts of your sheen. It won't be as shiny as that, but that will give me the best of both worlds. Give me the protection of wax and oil on the finish of, and gives you a little bit more gloss. And you can see here this one. Look how nicely, and you feel this one smoother. So the other thing, I could have lifted the fiber. So I might have, what's the correct technical term? Raised the grain. Could have raised the grain. Okay? Effectively raising the grain, more water than an organic solvent, but once again, it's been on the shelf for a long time. And we come back to Rudy's question, where keeping this for a long time, it attracts the water and absorbs water out of the atmosphere. So, once again, test. Test, 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 test. Test. And I am guilty of not testing and taking a finish to a newly made piece of furniture and thinking, oh boy, how am I going to get out of this? Okay, it's happened. We're impatient. And I have to deliver tomorrow, so therefore I need to do the finish. Any questions before we finish off?
Where do you get Pro Nature?
So you can purchase online. So just Google pronature.co.za, and they do have it on, you can order online. If you're looking for any particular samples or colors, you can contact me directly. I've got a full series of colors that we can test if you'd like. But really a solid product. Very, very little distinction between quality of finish-wise or what your finish will look like between Jack's Oleum, Pro Nature, and Rubio Monocoat. What's nice about Pro Nature, it's locally manufactured, it's environmentally safe.
Would you recommend that for a dining room table?
Absolutely, yes. Yeah. So I've finished a 3.5 meter boardroom table last year. And what I would do with a surface top, so surface top takes a lot of abuse. Now, I come from the corporate world, so the surface tops of boardroom tables during difficult meetings take more abuse than most, especially if you grab the side and you chew at it. So, Mark, somebody said to me the other day that they don't want to work for themselves, they want to go back to corporate. I said to them, unlikely in my case, I don't like corporate. But some surfaces take a lot of abuse, and you need to protect those surfaces as much as you can. Now, an oil-based finish is always going to require maintenance, and that's one of the drawbacks. That's one of the issues that people have with it. They say, I want to put a varnish on because the varnish will provide more protection in the long run, and it does. But when it does get damaged, you have to remove all of it to fix it. Whereas in oil-based finishes, you can spot fix. So you just sand the area to the same grit that it was finished off in the beginning, you apply the oil, you wouldn't know the difference. So in the case of a top, like and then just after the boardroom table, I did an 8-seater dining room table in Kiat as well. Both were Kiat. So what I did to finish that is I put a coat of the hard wax oil. They've got a line of products. It's a hard wax oil. It's specifically developed for high traffic areas like floors, wooden floors. So all the rest I do in normal straight indoor oil. Because the oil is not stained, you don't see the difference. So you won't see a difference between the tabletop or the legs. So the legs I do in normal oil. The top I do in hard wax oil, 2 coats. And then on top of that, I do a hard wax coat. Not a hard wax, the wax balm coat, because that has a lot more waxes in it. And if you buff it, it actually gives you a very nice satin sheen. If you apply any oil-based finish, just the oil finish, it's always going to end up with a matte finish. So, I don't know. Any more questions? Did we cover what you were hoping we would cover, other than French polish? I apologize.
I want to hear the trick about getting rid of the water ring.
Getting rid of the water ring. Please tell us.
Does anyone there have a lighter I can show you?
Oh boy, no. So,
I'll ask one of them and I'll show you.
do you heat the surface?
The trick is not to burn anything, but I can show you.
Oh boy. Okay, so there's going to be a lighter involved with solvents. Guys, online, please don't do this at home.
I used Restore It for like surface things and it works very well. What's that, sir? Restore It.
Is that a commercially available product?
It's here in the shop.
And the manufacturer?
It's in the name of Howard's.
Howard's. Okay, Howard's does a lot of finishes. So, did you find a lighter?
I did find a lighter.
Okay.
We just need to clear any of the solvents away.
Yes, please.
Because we literally don't want anything exposed.
After I set my kitchen alight, I'm stepping away from the source of heat.
Take it all away. I just need one more. Actually, you know what? Where's that cup of meth? This. No, this.
Okay. Neither Hardware Center nor myself take any responsibility for what he is about to do.
I don't condone this, but so the idea is to use some mess on the spot. You can just dip your finger.
Yeah, but you do it on this.
Oh, I could do it on the wood. So the idea would be to get it wet, but not very wet. So you don't want it flashing off in seconds, but you also don't want it staying on there forever. You set it alight, burns for about 2 seconds. That amount would be enough to get a 90% improvement in the white ring. It'll flash out the moisture. Right? If it's not enough, you can try it again. Just don't put too much at once, because if it dams up in one spot and burns for a long time, it's going to burn the finish.
No.
And potentially the wood underneath.
Okay.
But
So,
that'll suck out 90% of it, and then you just go over it again with your shellac.
so in effect,
Your shellac thing.
yeah. So in effect, what you're doing is you're melting the surface, removing the mark, and that's in effect what you're doing. So if you've got a piece of furniture that was finished with a varnish, and you have that as well, or an oil, it especially works well with oil. if you want to take away a ring mark from, say, water, is you can put a wet cloth on it and put a hot iron on it, and that often will remove that mark as well. If you make a piece of furniture and you happen to bump into it the day before you deliver it and it dings in, what you can do there as well is you can put a wet cloth on that area and put a hot iron on that, and that expands, because dried wood still has water in it. It's only something like, I'm going to lie now, but it's not perfectly 100% dry. So it's still got water in there. If you put a wet cloth in it, it will take the water into the cells, not in the fibers, and the moment you heat it, it pops it back out.
You'll notice here that it hasn't left
Anymore.
it's got a slight mattishness there where it was. So, you know, even if you just did that and left it, it would still probably look better than
Having the mark.
ring. But, I mean, if you're comfortable with your skills in shellacking and you go over it, you can just blend it into whatever was there before.
Does it work on any finish?
So I've done it successfully on polyester as well. And so the thing is, I think normal lacquer will probably burn very easily, and that's why you have to be quite careful to make sure that when you apply it as evenly as possible, thick enough that it doesn't flash off by itself within about 10 seconds, and thin enough that when you burn it, it doesn't burn longer for about 2-3 seconds.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if there's any sections that will dammed up, it will burn for a couple of seconds more, and it will burn the finish, and it will make it harder to get rid of the marks. And I accidentally burned some of the polyester that I was fixing. Little tiny spots and bubbles, but like I said, at the end of the day, after a little bit of buffing and polishing.
So in effect, the chemical component that forms the hard layer, you're melting it and resurfing it. That effectively what it comes down to is you're melting it and resetting it, and renewing that particular surface in the process.
What is the white ring actually?
Well, alcohol. If it's alcohol, the alcohol goes into the finish and dissolves the finish in that particular area. In regards to water is the perfect solvent. Okay? There are very few things on the planet that will not dissolve in water. It's the perfect solvent. Water is what makes life possible, not just because we drink it and we're 95% water, because it's the perfect chemical solvent to facilitate biological processes. That's a series of big words. So to some extent, even these resins will dissolve in water if it stands there long enough. And that's what causes the marks. So yeah, and that brings all the information I have to an end.
Just a tip with your kitchen blowing up.
Yeah.
When I had my gas stove put in, we were doing the COC in there. Prior to that, I bought one of those blankets.
Yes.
I had that hanging on the wall. And the guy looked around and he said, "Now, I should require a fire extinguisher." And he saw that hanging on the wall. He said, "This is the best tip I've ever picked up."
I agree. So I don't admit this often, but I had a fire extinguisher and a blanket hanging next to one another, and because of the cool factor, I decided to use the fire extinguisher. If I used the blanket, I would just put it over the flames. I wouldn't need to clean anything. So, yeah. But I've got both. I've got 2 fire alarms in the garage as well. And when I don't have the dust collector running, the dust sits in the fire alarm, and then it goes off repeatedly because it sits on the little sensor. So, yeah. It's only a pleasure. So please provide us with your details. Have a look at the hand plane. I think online.
What wood is it?
Are we good? Okay. So everybody online, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your questions. Really do appreciate it. I hope we've covered everything. And I hope where we've asked questions here that we were able to provide that information to you. It's always good then when our online attendees, for lack of a better word, feels like they're part of the group and ask questions, and really, really thank you for your time, and we hope to see you again. Before the outro, I've got a handmade wooden hand plane here, and I made the blade myself, tempered and hardened it. I'll tell these guys a little bit more about it. There we have it. It's heavier than you might think. So this is a jointer I made. Blades are not available commercially, so I made my own. And we're looking at doing a blade making for woodworkers morning session. So we're just waiting for a gap in Hardware Centre schedule. I'm not sure what's up next, Jordan. What's next?
So next is just going to be a couple of building on any program again.
Okay.
But in terms of the free classes and stuff, nothing planned just yet.
So nothing planned just yet for free classes. Your cabinet making, that's not online, is it? No. Okay. So if I can twist their arms hard enough, maybe next time I see you, especially the guys online, we'll be making our own blades. If there's any doubt that this is sharp, the guys can come and have a look and try and shave their arm hairs. That's how I test mine. So I've got a bald patch here every time my hand sharpen anything. So come and have a look. And for the guys online, it was nice to have you with us, and see you